From its earliest history to its impact on current events, stay tuned to number 1 to find out the truth behind impeachment proceedings. Number 10. The true meaning of impeachment. The word impeachment has been around a lot longer than you might expect. And while it may bring forth a certain image in your minds, it actually holds many different definitions depending on who you are and where you're from. For example, if we're talking about the strictly non-political definition of impeachment, that would be the action of calling into question the integrity or validity of something. Basically, it refers to something that needs to be brought forth because you don't believe that the truth is being fully told. However, if we're focusing on the political versions of the word, there is one that pertains to the British form of the word, a charge of treason or another crime against the state. And then, of course, there is the American version of the word, a charge of misconduct made against the holder of a public office. No matter which term you use, though, it does all point back to the same thing, mainly that someone did something very dishonest or illegal and they need to be brought to justice for it. Or at the very least be investigated for said crimes against the people, state, or country. That's why this is a word that many people don't throw around lightly because of its importance. Number 9. The true history of impeachment. Given the use of it in the United States history, it would be fair, for many of you, to think that the US came up with the notion of impeachment. But that's not actually true. In fact, it was one of many things that the US borrowed from England and then changed to fit their own systems of governments. In England, impeachment first started to make a name for itself in the 14th century, many years before the United States was even a thought in people's minds. Anyway, in England, their version of impeachment was to both charge and bring to trial a person of the courts or upper hierarchy and see if they were indeed guilty of crimes. Various ministers and other high-ranking officials were put to the courts in these impeachment hearings. Then, in the 16th century, the process got a bit more cruel, as it was used to remove people in Parliament that were just not favored in one form or another. In the course of a couple of decades, several people were removed, including the first Duke of Buckingham in 1626, the Earl of Stratford in 1640, Archbishop William Laud in 1642, the Earl of Clarendon in 1667, and Thomas Osborne, Earl of Danby in 1678. Eventually, England did away with impeachment because it was being used too frivolously, and it wasn't really a tool for justice as much as for building an ego and gaining power. So they made a better system which gave certain people the power to handle internal issues, and they haven't used it since 1806. The United States, however, adapted it as a means of checks and balances. Though they haven't used it as much as England has, it still holds sway in the country. Number 8. Why is impeachment important? Before we talk about the importance of impeachment, take a moment to like this video and join the Zero to Hero community by using the buttons below. From an outsider's perspective, the idea of any form of government where a body of politicians, whether it be Parliament or Congress, being able to bring to court another official, sometimes even a president, may seem very harsh. I mean, who kicked the bucket and made them king, right? But as noted, this is supposed to be about checks and balances, and especially in the United States, they didn't want a single office to get so powerful that they feel they can do anything. History has shown us what happens when a leader becomes so powerful that they literally dictate everything that can happen in a country. That's typically why they're called dictators. Many republics, including Rome, went from a land of the people to a single man ruling over them, and more times than not, it didn't work out like they hoped it would. With impeachment, we ensure that we have a card in our deck to deal with certain high-ranking officials so that they know we can punish them if they do something wrong. Sure, this usually leads to them trying to be ever so sneaky about what they're doing, but that just makes the bust all the sweeter. And as for president, it's a message to Congress that while you have to listen to what they say and potentially follow what they do, if you feel that they're breaking the law in any way, you now have power to put them in their place, and that is very important. Checks and balances matter, and when used correctly, impeachment is a way to make sure that the person at the top of the ladder isn't untouchable. Number 7. The 3 cases of impeachment in the United States. Current events notwithstanding, as they're still in the beginning process of impeachment trials, the United States has had 3 cases of impeachment occur. The first of which didn't happen until the 17th President of the United States, Andrew Johnson. He came after Abraham Lincoln and drastically undid many of the things Lincoln had set up. But the thing that got him into trouble was trying to illegally remove the Secretary of War, which was a direct conflict with congressional law. While he did get an impeachment trial, he was spared full removal of his presidency by a single vote. The second case of impeachment came via the Watergate scandal and Richard Nixon. Based upon his actions, Congress tried to have him impeached as well, even drawing up the documents to get things rolling. However, before they could fully enact things, Nixon resigned his office. Interestingly, Nixon has been the only president to do so, and it worked out well for him too, as he was never officially brought up on charges. The final president to be officially impeached, in terms of proceedings, was Bill Clinton. He was charged with perjury and obstruction of justice over an affair that he allegedly had with Monica Lewinsky. An impeachment trial was held, but a majority vote could not be reached, and thus he too was acquitted. Number 6. Grounds for impeachment. Given the rather tenuous nature of bringing charges against a president, the founders of the Constitution and other American laws made sure that there was a definition for how to proceed in an impeachment trial. The term that is used as grounds most times is high crimes and misdemeanors. Though, to be clear, that doesn't mean that the president has officially committed a crime, as that would be under criminal law and he would be arrested before ever being impeached. Rather, it's a declaration that the Congress of the U.S. believes that the president has committed a crime, of sorts, by going beyond the scope of their power. So a better way to think of impeachment is an abuse of power or a breach of the public trust. For example, a president declaring war is not an impeachable offense, but setting up war via certain acts just so you can declare war against another country, that would work because that's beyond the scope of the president's power and their rights as the leader of the nation. Number 5. Accountability in the House and Senate. Now, as we outlined during the English history of impeachment, the right to impeach someone can be used in not-so-nice ways. And there is always a danger that the House and Senate will try to impeach a president just because they don't like him. Thankfully, though, that's why the process of impeachment is difficult to proceed with, because a single person in the House or Senate cannot go through with such things on their own. Rather, a majority is needed. And even then, it has to go through approvals on certain sides and with certain people in order to be truly valid. A person in the White House once said that the House of Representatives has never attempted to launch an impeachment inquiry against the president without a majority of the House taking political accountability for that decision. And that's what this is about. Accountability for what they're about to do. Same goes for the Senate. If they help to bring this to trial, they have to be accountable for what does or does not happen. Number 4. Balance on both sides. There's a lot of misconceptions about where the true power of impeachment lies. Is it the House of Representatives or is it the Senate? In truth, it's both. One can start it, and the other can finish it, per se. But even when the trial itself is going, both sides have an equal say in what's going on here. So, says the Constitution, whensoever the Senate shall receive notice from the House of Representatives that managers are appointed on their part to conduct an impeachment against any person and are directed to carry articles of impeachment to the Senate, the Secretary of the Senate shall immediately inform the House of Representatives that the Senate is ready to receive the managers for the purpose of exhibiting such articles of impeachment, agreeably to such notice. So, as I say, it takes two to tango. And, in this case, to impeach. Number 3. The president can defend himself. Another misconception is that when the trial for impeachment goes on, the president is forced to just wait out the proceedings and see what happens. But that's not true in the slightest. The president is not only allowed to defend himself, he's allowed to have lawyers sit in on the hearings and get documents of evidence and other court-appointed notices so that he knows what's being put against him. In many ways, this is just like a court of law. The defendant is the president, and as such, he has the right to an attorney, to say certain things, to call witnesses, and more. The only thing he can't do, as part of the checks and balances, is veto the whole thing or try to overrule the verdict put against him. Number 2. Requirements for an impeachment trial. Believe it or not, the requirements for a Senate impeachment trial is actually very small. The rules are thus. The Chief Justice presides over the Senate trial of a president, but not the trial of any other official. Each senator must be sworn, similar to the way jurors take an oath, and a 2/3 vote is required to convict on any article of impeachment. It's the last rule that usually undoes impeachment trials, though, as getting a 2/3 majority is hard with political dealings and other events going on. But once these 3 requirements are honored, everything proceeds like it would in a criminal trial with statements, witnesses, evidence, and more. Number 1. The future of impeachment. The eyes of the government and the world are on the United States right now in terms of impeachment, and it's anyone's guess right now how things will go. But no matter what happens, conviction or acquittal, the power of impeachment will still remain, and it will remain a vital part of our history until the need for it has passed. It is very possible that if the U.S. experiences an abuse of power similar to England, that something new and hopefully better will take its place. But in the meantime, we'll all get to watch the impeachment trials unfold in the media. Did you find this video informative? Let us know in the comments below, and take care.